What happens when an indestructible mountain suddenly explodes from the inside out, turning decades of military engineering into a self-destructive fireball in a matter of seconds? Deep beneath the rugged peaks of central Iran, a secret military fortress built to survive any conventional war was just turned into a massive, hollow grave, proving that nowhere is safe anymore. If you want to stay ahead of the world's most critical military secrets and understand the hidden conflicts shaping our future, hit that subscribe button right now, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who loves deep geopolitical analysis. To understand the sheer magnitude of what just transpired, you have to picture the scene in your mind. A silent mountain peak south of Isfahan stands quietly against the sky, looking just like any other part of the rugged Iranian landscape. Then, without warning, the earth trembles violently. It is not a blast on the surface. There is no bright flash illuminating the sky from above. Instead, the entire mountain seems to lift and expand from within. Plumes of fire, dust, and rock erupt violently from deep within the stone. It looks as if the mountain itself has decided to detonate. Long after the initial impact, wave after wave of violent secondary explosions tear through the mountain's core. Jet fuel, solid rocket propellants, and warheads ignite in a relentless chain reaction. This is the unmistakable signature of a weapon designed to do the impossible. It is a bomb that does not explode when it hits the ground. It is a weapon that digs deep into the earth, punching through solid rock and reinforced concrete before unleashing its fury in the very heart of an underground fortress. This devastating event has shattered 4 decades of Iranian military strategy. For 40 years, Iran's top military planners operated under a very specific assumption. They believed that if you dig deep enough, reinforce your ceilings with enough concrete, and hide your entrances inside natural mountain walls, you can survive anything. The laws of physics were their armor. They knew that standard precision weapons could not touch them. No standard satellite-guided bomb, no low-flying cruise missile, and no ordinary penetrator could pierce through hundreds of feet of solid granite to reach their underground arsenals. They built an entire network of subterranean military installations, believing they were completely untouchable. But they did not account for a new breed of American weapon. They did not foresee the arrival of the GBU-72. To truly grasp the strategic weight of this strike, we have to look closely at the map and understand the geography. This was not a strike along the coastline. It did not take place near the vulnerable shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz. It was not one of the heavily guarded port cities that have been targeted in recent maritime operations. This strike occurred deep within the interior of the country. Isfahan sits in the geographical heart of Iran, far removed from the ocean. This region is the absolute center of Iran's ballistic missile assembly and production ecosystem. The mountain complexes south of Isfahan are not just simple storage bunkers. They are highly sophisticated subterranean factories. They represent decades of massive financial investment and intense engineering. Satellites looking down on this region have confirmed the existence of what analysts call an underground missile city. The construction has been sprawling across multiple phases for years. Entrances to these tunnels are positioned to blend seamlessly into the natural, jagged terrain. Inside, the tunnels are wide and reinforced with heavy steel archways. The layout was designed for high-speed, protected operations. The missiles are kept safe under hundreds of feet of solid granite. When a launch order is given, these massive weapons are wheeled out to the tunnel mouths on specialized transport vehicles, prepared for launch, fired into the sky, and then wheeled back into the deep safety of the mountain before any retaliatory strike can hit them. This design was incredibly clever and represented a massive shift in military thinking. The Iranian engineers realized that they could not match the air power of the United States or its allies. They knew they could not win a battle for control of the skies. So, instead of trying to fight in the air, they decided to hide from it. They used massive tunnel boring machines, often purchased under the guise of civilian infrastructure projects like subways or water diversion tunnels, to carve out massive hollow chambers deep inside the mountains. They lined these chambers with thick layers of high-density concrete, reinforced with steel rebar. They built massive blast doors, some weighing dozens of tons, designed to seal shut and protect the interior from the shockwaves of near-miss explosions. They installed advanced ventilation systems to filter out toxic gases and dust, and they built underground power stations and fuel depots to allow the facilities to operate completely independently for weeks at a time. The goal was to create a city beneath the earth that could withstand a nuclear-level conventional bombardment. For months, this facility was a prime target for American intelligence and military planners. During this conflict, the Safatan Mountain complex has been hit repeatedly. It has absorbed close to 20 separate strikes from some of the most powerful bombers in the American arsenal. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, B-52 Stratofortresses, and F-15E Strike Eagles have pounded the area. Yet, despite 20 high-yield strikes, a deeply frustrating pattern emerged for the attacking forces. The very morning after these massive air raids, ballistic missiles were still rising from those exact same mountains. They continued to soar into the sky, targeting military outposts and regional adversaries. The operational resilience of this facility seemed absolute. The reason for this survival was simple. The entrances visible on satellite feeds were not where the missiles were actually kept. Those entrances were merely the gateways to a subterranean maze buried far deeper than anyone realized. Previous generations of bunker busters could destroy the entrances and collapse the tunnels near the surface, but they could not reach the actual storage chambers. The missiles survived, the crews cleared the debris, and the launches continued. This cycle of strike and survival had become the norm, leading many to believe that the underground city was truly impervious to conventional weapons. Iran's engineers spent decades expanding this underground city to ensure its longevity. They created multiple access points and exit lanes to ensure that if one tunnel entrance was blocked, others could be used. They built dummy entrances and decoy structures on the surface. These decoys were designed to look like active tunnel entrances, complete with fake tire tracks and mock security checkpoints. They were intended to trick American intelligence into wasting expensive precision bombs on solid, empty rock. Overcoming this defense required more than just a heavier bomb. It required a level of intelligence work that could map the exact three-dimensional coordinates of the active underground chambers. The GBU-72 solved this dual challenge. It combined extreme physical penetration with precision targeting to ensure it detonated in the exact chamber where the missiles were stored rather than an empty tunnel. When the mountain erupted, it was proof that American intelligence had mapped the interior perfectly, and the weapon had reached its target. The GBU-72 is a 5,000-pound advanced penetrator. It is the deepest penetrating conventional bomb in the American arsenal. Before this strike, it had only been used in limited operations along the coastline to target underground drone hangars and anti-ship missile storage sites. Those early tests proved the weapon could easily punch through coastal limestone. But Isfahan was the ultimate test. It was a target protected by deep, hard granite, designed to withstand the worst-case scenario of an air campaign. By deploying the GBU-72 here, the U.S. military sent a clear message. The most heavily protected weapons program in Iran is no longer safe. The psychological impact of this weapon cannot be overstated. It changes the calculus for every nation building underground facilities. If the mountains of Isfahan cannot protect you, then nowhere can. If you're fascinated by how advanced physics and cutting-edge military engineering are reshaping the modern battlefield, consider sharing this video with a friend who loves defense technology. And make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you never miss our deep dives into hidden conflicts. To understand how this weapon achieves such devastating results, we have to look closely at the physics of bunker busting. When a heavy bomb strikes a solid surface at high speed, it experiences an incredibly violent deceleration. The force of this sudden slowdown can easily rip a standard bomb apart before it can explode. If the bomb's casing breaks, the explosives inside scatter, or the fuse is destroyed, the weapon is rendered completely useless. Iran's military engineers spent decades studying these exact physical limitations. They measured the strength of their concrete and the density of their mountains against the known capabilities of American ordnance. They calculated a safety depth that they believed was completely beyond the reach of any conventional weapon. They thought they had solved the equation of survival. The GBU-72 completely rewrote those calculations. Its outer shell is made of a highly advanced, ultra-tough steel alloy designed to survive the mind-boggling pressure of slamming into solid granite at near-sonic speeds. The weapon does not break apart. It maintains its structural integrity as it claws its way through feet of concrete and rock. Furthermore, it utilizes a highly sophisticated smart fuse. Traditional fuses detonate upon impact, or after a simple timer. The GBU-72's fuse is different. It is programmed to count the layers of concrete and void spaces it passes through. It remains completely silent as it pierces the outer layers of the mountain. It only detonates once it has penetrated the designated depth and entered the hollow chamber where the missiles and fuel are stored. This delay is critical. It ensures the energy is released exactly where it will do the most damage, when that 5,000-pound warhead finally explodes inside that closed, underground space. The physical effects are catastrophic. The force of the explosion has nowhere to escape. The mountain itself acts as a pressure cooker, trapping the energy and reflecting the shock wave back and forth through the tunnel network. This massive blast of heat and pressure instantly ignites the solid rocket fuel and warheads of the stored missiles. What follows is a self-sustaining chain reaction. The facility is destroyed not just by the American bomb, but by its own highly volatile inventory. Decades of engineering are turned against itself in a matter of seconds. The heat is so intense that it melts the steel supports of the tunnels, causing the entire structure to collapse inward. There is no salvageable equipment left behind. There are no missiles left to launch. There is only a hollowed-out mountain filled with rubble and dust. The delivery method used for this strike is just as important as the bomb itself. The choice of the F-15E Strike Eagle to deliver the GBU-72 carries massive strategic implications. On paper, the U.S. military has several aircraft capable of carrying a 5,000-pound bomb. The massive B-2 Spirit stealth bomber and the B-1B Lancer can both carry incredibly heavy payloads. In fact, the B-2 is the only aircraft capable of carrying the even larger GBU-57, which weighs a staggering 30,000 pounds. However, operating these heavy bombers is a massive logistical challenge. B-2 bombers typically have to fly all the way from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, or from remote islands like Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. These round-trip missions take many hours to plan and execute. They require massive fleets of aerial refueling tankers and immense coordination across multiple international airspaces. This long planning cycle means heavy bombers are not well suited for rapidly changing situations. If intelligence suddenly spots a highly valuable target that is about to be moved, a heavy bomber flying from halfway across the world simply cannot get there in time. The F-15E Strike Eagle completely changes this timeline. These dual-role fighter bombers are already staged at military bases right in the Middle East, just a short distance from Iranian airspace. An F-15E loaded with a GBU-72 can go from sitting quietly on a runway to dropping its payload on a target in central Iran in less than 45 minutes. This rapid response time is not just a minor convenience. It is a massive tactical advantage. It means the U.S. military can act on real-time intelligence. If a satellite spots a convoy of ballistic missiles being wheeled out of a mountain tunnel, the Strike Eagle can destroy them before they can even be prepped for launch. This speed denies the enemy the chance to react or hide. The GBU-72's guidance system is specifically designed to support this fast-paced style of warfare. It does not rely on a single, rigid flight path. It can be programmed with pre-planned GPS coordinates before takeoff, allowing it to glide autonomously toward its target. However, it can also receive live, real-time updates while it is mid-air. The weapons systems officer, sitting in the back seat of the F-15E, can update the bomb's targeting computer at the very last second. If fresh intelligence reveals that the target has shifted to a different tunnel entrance, the coordinates can be adjusted instantly. This flexibility is crucial when flying in highly contested airspace. Iran's air defense network, although heavily damaged by months of targeted suppression strikes, is still a major threat. When a fighter jet approaches a heavily defended area like Isfahan, it must be prepared to face incoming surface-to-air missiles. If an enemy radar locks onto the F-15E, the pilot cannot simply fly in a straight line to drop the bomb. The pilot must perform violent, high-G defensive maneuvers to break the lock and survive. With older precision weapons, such evasive maneuvers would often disrupt the laser tracking or targeting systems, causing the bomb to miss its target entirely. The GBU-72 solves this dangerous problem. If the pilot is forced to maneuver defensively, the bomb instantly locks onto its last known GPS coordinates. It continues to guide itself precisely to the target, even while the fighter jet is diving and turning to escape enemy fire. This keeps the aircrew safe while ensuring the target is still destroyed. The visual evidence from the Isfahan strike tells a story that goes far beyond simple physical destruction. When you look at the footage of the mountain erupting, you're seeing the total collapse of Iran's primary military deterrent. The secondary explosions are the key. When a normal bomb hits a surface target, there's a single massive explosion, followed by a cloud of smoke. But in Isfahan, the initial impact was followed by a series of smaller, violent blasts that continued for hours. These secondary blasts were the sounds of ballistic missiles exploding inside their storage racks. Each blast represented millions of dollars in advanced military hardware being wiped out. The solid rocket fuel, which is highly volatile and extremely difficult to manufacture, burned with an intense, white-hot heat, melting the very steel supports of the underground chambers. By destroying these missiles inside their home mountain, the U.S. military proved that the Earth itself is no longer a shield. This has massive psychological consequences for the Iranian military. For decades, the soldiers and engineers working inside these mountains felt safe. They believed they were shielded by hundreds of feet of solid granite. They believed they could operate with impunity. That illusion of safety has been completely shattered. Every soldier working in an underground facility now knows that they are working inside a potential tomb. This fear spreads quickly through the ranks. It affects morale. It affects decision-making. It makes commanders hesitant to store their most valuable assets in what were once considered safe zones. If you want to support independent, highly detailed defense reporting that cuts through the noise of mainstream media, please take a second to share this video on your favorite social media platform, subscribe to the channel, and tell us your thoughts in the comments section below. This physical vulnerability on land is mirrored by a growing crisis for Iran at sea. Around the same time as the Isfahan strike, the leadership of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy made a dramatic public declaration. They announced that the Strait of Hormuz was officially closed to all maritime traffic. They warned that any ship attempting to pass through the narrow waterway would be targeted and destroyed. This was intended to be a show of absolute strength, a demonstration that Iran could still choke off a massive portion of the world's oil supply. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical choke points on the planet. Nearly 20% of the world's oil consumption passes through this narrow strip of water. For years, Iran has used the threat of closing this strait as a leverage point in negotiations. They believed that the global economy was held hostage by their ability to mine the waters or launch swarm attacks with fast boats. But the reality on the water tells a completely different story. Hours after the declaration was made, Iranian forces launched several attack drones at a commercial oil tanker traveling through the strait. It was supposed to be a demonstration of their ability to enforce the blockade. However, U.S. Navy warships and fighter jets operating in the area quickly intercepted every single drone before they could get anywhere near the tanker. The ship continued on its journey without a scratch. Today, hundreds of massive cargo ships and oil tankers continue to sail through the Strait of Hormuz every single week. They travel through secure, heavily guarded corridors under the watchful eyes of American naval escorts and air cover. The blockade that Iran claimed to establish is practically non-existent. The insurance rates for ships passing through the strait have remained stable, indicating that the market does not believe the threat is real. This failed blockade reveals a deep gap between what Iran's leaders claim they can do and what they can actually achieve. It is one thing to make a fiery speech on television, declaring a major international waterway closed. It is another thing entirely to actually enforce that closure against the combined power of the U.S. Navy and Air Force. By successfully protecting commercial shipping, the U.S. military has shown that Iran's maritime leverage has evaporated. This loss of leverage at sea makes the destruction of the Isfahan missile city even more devastating. Historically, if Iran felt cornered on land, it could always threaten to disrupt the global economy by closing the Strait of Hormuz. But with their naval forces neutralized and their drone attacks easily intercepted, they are forced to rely almost entirely on their ballistic missile arsenal to project power and deter attacks. Now, with the GBU-72 proving it can wipe out those missiles deep inside their underground sanctuaries, that final line of defense is rapidly crumbling. They are losing their teeth on every front. The timing of the Isfahan strike reveals an incredibly intense diplomatic drama playing out behind closed doors. There was a critical 5-hour window that occurred right after the bunker buster bomb hit the mountain. Exactly 5 hours after the GBU-72 detonated deep inside the Safatan mountain complex, a dramatic announcement was made. The public was informed that a highly significant military deal had been approved at the very highest levels of Iranian leadership. The swiftness of this response is highly telling. It suggests that the sudden violent destruction of their most secure missile facility acted as a massive wake-up call for the decision-makers in Tehran. The realization that their underground fortress was no longer safe forced them to scramble to the negotiating table. They understood that every hour they waited was another hour where another mountain could be opened up by American steel. However, the diplomatic situation quickly descended into absolute confusion. Shortly after the deal was reported, a highly public message was shared on social media by the American leadership. This message pointed out that the terms being leaked by Iranian sources bore absolutely no resemblance to the actual written agreement. It described the Iranian claims of a completed deal as weak and pathetic, and warned that the regime needed to get its act together quickly. Adding to this immense confusion, while these sensitive negotiations were supposedly wrapping up, an Iranian drone launched a violent attack against an Indian commercial ship leaving the Strait of Hormuz. This attack happened while diplomats were supposedly finalizing peace. It shows a lack of coordination that is dangerous for everyone involved. This bizarre sequence of events highlights a structural problem within the Iranian state. It is the problem of a fractured leadership. The government in Tehran is not a single unified entity that speaks with one voice. Instead, it is a deeply divided house split into competing factions with completely different priorities. On one side, you have the political leadership, including the foreign ministry and the parliament speaker. This faction is highly concerned with the survival of the state. They look at the crumbling economy, the devastated infrastructure, and the relentless air campaign, and they realize that the regime is facing a potential existential crisis. They want economic relief, international legitimacy, and an end to the destructive bombing runs. They are willing to make concessions to save the regime from total collapse. They see the GBU-72 strikes as a warning sign that time is running out. On the other side of the divide stands the powerful leadership of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. The IRGC is not just a military branch. It is a massive political and economic empire within Iran. Their entire institutional power and wealth are built on the continuation of conflict and the maintenance of their ballistic missile and drone programs. To them, giving up their missiles in a peace deal is completely unacceptable. It would mean stripping themselves of their own power and influence. Therefore, While the political diplomats are sitting in quiet rooms trying to negotiate a ceasefire, the IRGC commanders are out on the water ordering drone strikes on commercial ships. They are actively trying to sabotage any deal that would limit their capabilities. They believe that if they can just hold out a little longer, the political pressure in the United States or among allies will force a withdrawal. They are gambling with the future of their country. This deep internal split makes negotiating a lasting agreement incredibly difficult. Any promise made by a political negotiator in Tehran is essentially useless if the military commanders on the ground refuse to honor it. For any agreement to actually work, the military forces must be forced to stand down, which is something the political leadership has struggled to achieve. The 5-hour window after the Isfahan strike was a brief moment when the sheer shock of the GBU-72's power seemed to unite both factions in fear. But as the hours passed, the old divisions quickly re-emerged, throwing the negotiations back into chaos. This fracture is not new. It has been a feature of Iranian politics for decades. But in the face of a modern, high-tech military campaign, this disunity becomes a fatal weakness. The enemy does not need to defeat the whole government at once. They can exploit the gaps between the factions. When you look closely at what Iran actually wants out of any potential agreement, their goals become very clear. They have 3 primary demands. First, they want massive financial compensation. They want billions of dollars to rebuild the ports, bridges, and factories that have been destroyed in the air campaign. Crucially, they want to use this money to rebuild their shattered underground missile cities. They see the destruction as temporary setbacks that can be fixed with enough money and time. Second, they absolutely refuse to allow any limits on the number of ballistic missiles they can keep. They argue that these missiles are essential for their national defense. They claim they need them to deter Israel and the United States. Third, they want to keep all of their highly enriched nuclear material, which they view as their ultimate insurance policy against foreign invasion. They treat the surrender of this material as a red line that cannot be crossed. These demands are completely unacceptable to the United States and its allies. The entire goal of the American military campaign is to permanently neutralize the threat of Iranian ballistic missiles and prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon. Giving Iran billions of dollars while allowing them to keep their missiles and nuclear material would simply allow them to rebuild their military power and start the conflict all over again in a few years. This fundamental disagreement is the core conflict of the entire crisis. It is a clash between a regime trying to preserve its leverage and a coalition trying to remove that leverage permanently. There is very little middle ground here. Either Iran gives up the tools of coercion, or the bombing continues until those tools are destroyed. While the diplomatic struggle continues, the U.S. military is already preparing for the future of warfare. In a highly significant move, the Senate Armed Services Committee recently authorized the creation of a brand new 4-star military command. This is the Combatant Command for robotics and autonomous systems. This is a massive development. It places drone warfare, artificial intelligence, and autonomous weapons on the exact same institutional level as traditional commands like Central Command or Special Operations Command. This decision was driven by the incredible success of cheap, unmanned systems in the current conflict. During the operations in the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. military deployed highly advanced low-cost drones. One prime example is the Lucas drone, which costs a mere $35,000 per unit. These small, agile drones, alongside autonomous sea vessels, were used to hunt down and destroy Iranian fast attack boats and coastal radar sites. By using artificial intelligence to coordinate these unmanned systems, the U.S. military was able to achieve massive victories at a fraction of the cost. The creation of this new command is a clear warning to all of America's adversaries. It shows that the U.S. military has officially moved past the experimental phase of drone warfare. Unmanned, AI-driven systems are now a permanent core part of how the United States projects its power. For countries like Iran, whose military technology is already struggling under the weight of sanctions, matching this level of technological sophistication is virtually impossible. They cannot build enough missiles to outnumber the drones. They cannot build enough air defenses to stop the swarms. The cost-exchange ratio is completely against them. They are spending millions to defend against threats that cost thousands. This economic attrition is just as deadly as the physical destruction. The implications of this institutional decision extend far beyond the current conflict in Iran. It signals a shift in how wars will be fought for the next century. A 4-star command for autonomous systems means that resources, training, and doctrine will all be focused on integrating machines into the fight. It means that human pilots will increasingly work alongside AI wingmen. It means that ships will be escorted by unmanned submarines. It means that the battlefield will be populated by sensors and shooters that do not feel fear and do not need to sleep. For Iran, and for every potential adversary watching how this conflict has played out, the message is clear. The era of relying on massive, static fortifications is over. The era of relying on large, manned fleets is ending. The future belongs to those who can master the integration of artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. In the end, the devastating strike on the Isfahan mountain complex represents a historic shift in the balance of power. It has proven that no amount of rock, concrete, or underground engineering can protect an army from modern precision weapons. The physical armor that Iran spent 40 years building has been completely bypassed by a single highly advanced bomb. The secondary explosions that echoed through the valleys of Isfahan were the sounds of a nation's primary military deterrent destroying itself. It was the sound of a strategy failing in real time. The mountain did not protect the missiles. The mountain amplified their destruction. As the smoke slowly clears from the shattered peaks of central Iran, the clock is ticking. The U.S. military has shown that it has the intelligence to locate these hidden fortresses, the aircraft to reach them quickly, and the weapons to destroy them completely. The leadership in Tehran must now make a critical choice. They can continue to cling to a shattered military strategy and watch as their remaining arsenals are systematically turned into rubble. Or they can finally accept the reality of their situation and agree to a genuine, lasting peace. The GBU-72 is loaded, the Strike Eagles are waiting on the runways, and the next decision is up to them. The world is watching to see if the lessons of the exploding mountain are learned, or if the next strike will be even more devastating. The silence of the mountain after the explosion is louder than any speech made in a diplomatic hall. It is the sound of a new reality settling over the region, a reality where depth is no longer safety, and where technology has caught up with the secrets buried in the dark.